What's up? It's your friendly neighborhood laser lady, and I just got back from Target. I was on the hunt for cool things I could laser upon or with, whatever. So let's see what I got. First thing I got, in the little dollar section at the front of the store, they had these glass jars with wooden tops. That's what caught my eye because we are so going to be able to etch something awesome into this. And I've been mixing my own teas lately, so I felt a little inspired. Over in the home organization laundry area, I got a bunch of clothespins. I thought of a kind of interesting idea to use these with some of my plants. And I know what you're thinking. It's going to be a pain to try to etch on each individual one of these. And I think I have a workaround for that. Another thing I got on the stationery section is this cool cork board. It's actually 3 of them. Last but not least, we got for 50 whole US cents composition notebook. The step to make this a laserable surface, not that it isn't already, is to actually spray paint it. I'm going to spray paint this white to kind of get the effect I'm going for. So it's gonna need some dry time. Let's get started. Here is the silly little design I came up with. I'm going to stick the book here, now that it's all dry, in my laser with the pegs that you can get for free on my Patreon page. You don't have to be a patron. You can just download them for free. Anybody can do it, so I'll be sure to have a link for that below. But here it is, all etched out. So fun. To embellish this a little bit, we're going to use our Sharpie paint pens, which I'm sure you've seen me use several times before, and I will use them several times in the future. I love them because they are permanent, which this is probably going to have a little wear and tear over the coming weeks, so it's good that I can keep the color to stay. Next up, we have the little jars with the wooden lids. I'm just going to make one today, but first we're going to need to sand this down a bit. It's a little rough, so I want it to be nice and polished. I'm using a 180 sand grit. Oh, and here's my cat, just making sure I'm doing good work. Thanks, boss. Anyway, next on the glass part, I actually have some of this armor etch laying around. If you've ever used it, it's kind of like etching in a glass without a laser, doing it chemically. So I'm just going to use an old paintbrush and really smear this stuff on there so it gets a nice even etch. While that sits, let's do the lid here with this fun little design. I'll have all these designs for download on my Patreon page. Here it is all done. There's some resin left over from the etching process, so we're going to give that another sand down. You could put some sort of sealant on the lid, but I like the natural look, so we're going to leave it like that. Now we just got to rinse off all the armor etch, and it turned out pretty good. Not as good, obviously, as a laser. And let's fill it up with some tea I grew in the garden. We got chamomile here, a little bit of mint, something super easy to grow if you ever thought about it. Prairie coneflower has great medicinal benefits, and lavender is probably my favorite flavor of anything. So now I'm ready to have some tea and go to bed. Next up, we got the clothespins, and I know you're wondering, how are we going to etch all of these? Well, the first thing we're going to do is leave them on this cardboard strip. If yours were loose in a bag, then do put them on a cardboard strip. Measure them out, and let's make sure my little pattern here is the right dimensions. I have the pattern just outside the lines a little, excuse me, Miss Roxy, a little bit so we get good coverage. And as you can see here, it didn't etch all the way through the cardboard strip because that wasn't in focus. So now we can finish these up in a bunch of different ways. First, I'm going to take this wood stain that I just love. It is like no odor, no chemicals. I don't need gloves. It doesn't smell bad. I'll have a link for that below. The next ones I'm going to sand a little bit so it soaks up this marker ink. It's a fun and super cheap way, as you can see, they're just normal markers, to add a little bit of color without having a bunch of different kinds of stain. Alternatively, you could have painted these before you etch them out. Just something to consider. The next day, I assembled them all back together with the clips, and I'm going to super glue some, while using my jewelry metal glue, same thing as super glue, these niobium, if I'm saying that right, magnets to the back. They'd make great chip clips or note keepers for your fridge or any other magnetic place. Here's one of the stained clothespins all ready to help me hold some of my plant vines. Next up is the cork board. As I teased at the very beginning of this video, came with 3 of them. And what are these? Pins? Oh wow, 2 hole pins for your boards and some squares to attach it to your wall. Now, one thing you want to do with this cork board, as you can see, the cork layer is very thin. So we're going to do wildly low settings for this. I'm talking silly low. Now I'm just going to measure this out and make sure that my cool design fits and get to lasering. The trick to a design like this is getting it centered. Some of you I know have an automatic function for that, but I don't. We're just going to be using a super duper super low setting. And the way you know if you've had it a little too hot is when you rub your finger over the etching. There's a bunch of soot left over, and it looks like I got the settings just right. It turns out so dark and so beautiful. Instead of using this like a normal cork board, I'm going to be putting these hooks on there. It could be used as like a key holder, but I'm going to surprisingly use it for my plants. I just am going to put 3 hooks in as evenly as I can and get the little sticky pads on the back and press it onto my wall here next to this ivy plant I have. That's getting pretty long. I'm gonna use these little hooks to kind of decoratively put my plant so it's better in the light there.